Good stuff in jail. Half the man, I'm so frustrated. What is it you say? Don't speak, just turn away. Despite all my pain and misery.
Listening to Porch Talk, and now here's your host, Shakey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud and honored to have a guest today that I consider a great friend and even a mentor to me in the Bigfoot community. I have Mr. Dan Baker. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Steve. How are you?
Dan, any day above ground's a good day for me.
That's you'll have to excuse me. I got a little bit of a cold here, so like I said earlier, my wife said I sound like a grizzly bear. So I hope everybody can understand me out there today.
Yeah, you're loud and clear on mine. Nice and clear here. So, Dan, the first time I've interviewed you. So usually I like to start with the beginning. So what all caused the beginning of Dan Baker and Bigfoot?
Well, I know you know all about that real famous film that was made back in 1967 by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. At the time, 1967, I think I was like 12 years old. And I was sitting in the living room one evening with my parents, and this film came over the news or some program that they had on, and it showed the Patterson Gimlin film, and I was in just total awe of what I saw on that TV screen. And from that moment on, throughout my life, I had been interested in it, and I'd been reading about it and doing as much research as I could, on my own, all the way up through actually until now. But Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, those two guys, to me, they were heroes. But that's what got me started in it.
Wow. What kind of research did you start doing when you started?
Well, back in 1967, there really wasn't a whole lot out there, so you go as a kid, you take your library card and you go and you look for stuff on Bigfoot. Well, there really wasn't a whole lot out there, and to me, as a 12-year-old boy, it kind of looked like just a big, upright walking gorilla. So, I started, reading books on gorillas and chimpanzees and stuff like that. But, over the years, as time went on and people started, having more experiences and more material became available, I read up on that, and then then came the computers. So, I started, getting into the internet and researching on the internet and stuff like that. And I did that for a number of years, and then I don't know how many years ago it was. My wife and I decided that we wanted to go out in the field and start, doing some research as well. So, along with the research on the computers and going out with my wife and stuff, we started that's how I started, doing that kind of thing, field research. And then, of course, I got into a couple Facebook Bigfoot groups, and one thing led to another, and it actually, I could probably sit here all day and go through a whole big long spiel of everything that I've done, but I don't want to bore you to death. But as time went on, I just gained more experience and more knowledge of different things, and here we are today.
In your field research, what about your evidence you found?
Well, it's I'm actually kind of happy you asked that, because we had an area here in Ohio in Carroll County we called Research Area R306, and this place is just it was phenomenal. I'll never forget the first time we ever went there. This place was just incredible. One part of it was wetland, and up on these hillsides around this wetland were all farmers like corn, soybeans, and things like that growing up around there. And then further up, even further up on top of these hills, it was all wooded, forested area. And so the first time we ever went there, we were riding on an ATV, and we were coming around a corner, and all at once my wife says, "Hey, there's a tree break." And so we stopped the ATV real quick and got off and went over, and I'm headed for this tree break because I wanted to examine this tree break. And so I'm walking over there, and at the time I was with Paul Hayes, I believe. You know Paul, right?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, anyway, Paul Hayes was there, and so I was walking over towards this tree break, and all at once Paul says, "Oh, wait." He said, "Stop." He said, "Look down at your feet." And I stopped dead in my tracks where I was. And lo and behold, down, right where I was standing was an enormous bone bed. And there was cattle bones. And I'm talking not just one or two, there were dozens of them. I'm talking about pelvises, and there were 3 skulls there, and leg bones and broken ribs and broken vertebrae and stuff like that, and it was just incredible to see this way up on top of this hill inside these woods. And we had no explanation for how these cattle got there, what happened to them, but they were all 3 of them laying within a 15-foot radius. And it was just, that was creepy, to see them 3 dead cattle laying there. Now there was no skin or bone or muscle or anything like that laying around, no entrails or anything. It was all just nothing but bone. So they had been there for a while. But then, we got done looking at some of that stuff, and I actually picked up one of the leg bones, and it's got great big teeth marks in it. And I have it here with my collection right now to this day. But we started into the woods there, and we started finding things that, you read about and you see pictures of. And we were finding all this stuff. We were finding these stick structures, interwoven stick structures. We found 2 of those. We found all kinds of tree breaks, and we actually found what appeared to be kind of like a platform, probably about 20 feet up in the air. And it was the top of the platform had like 2-inch diameter trees interwoven in between other trees, and it was almost like a hunter's platform. I don't know if you've ever seen the platforms that they use in India to hunt tigers from. The guys get up there and sit on that. That's what it reminded me of. And so as time went on, of course, Paul and I went our separate ways, and I started my own group, American Primate Exploration. Well, we continued to go down there and investigate things. And at one point, my wife had a sighting. It was more than my wife. It was we were again on the ATV, and we were going around the corner of a cornfield there, and there was an access road going off to the side from one field to another, and it went through the corner of the woods. Well, down at the end of this access road, there were 3 round bales of hay, and they were stacked up kind of like a pyramid there. So I wasn't paying any attention except, to watch where I was going on this ATV because I didn't want to kill everybody. So we're going on down through there, and all at once everybody started yelling for me to stop. Well, by the time I got stopped, my wife and one of the other fellows had already jumped out, and named one fellow's name was Jeremy, And Jeremy jumped out, and he's running down this access road. And I'm like, what the heck's going on here? Well, my wife and Jeremy at the exact same time saw a big black creature standing down by those round bales of hay. And but by the time, I got off of it and Jeremy jumped off and everything, whatever it was gone. But they described it. We got them both, off into separate areas, and we asked them questions about what they saw, and they both described the exact same thing. It was up above. They said it stood up above the hay bales. Well, that's, you got those big round bales of hay. They're probably 4 feet in diameter.
Yeah, they're
3,
pretty
4,
big.
4. And yeah, so they said that the head was actually a little bit above that. So, that was one big son of a gun, And, but by the time they got around the corner, it was gone. So, one thing led to another, and we kept doing research in this area. And then we started finding footprints. And we found these footprints down in the wetlands around the lakes. Now, in these lakes, there's small fish, there's frogs, and there's, all kinds of turtles and muskrats and just, all kinds of wildlife down there. But the first footprint that was ever found was discovered by my friend Ray Gardner and Jeremy Walls alongside one of the lakes. And it actually shows evidence of mid-tarsal flexibility. And in fact, I have that cast here with my collection right now. But it was shown to Dr. Meldrum, Jeff Meldrum, and he agreed that it shows possibility of mid-tarsal flexibility. And that was, I forget what year that was, but almost exactly a year later, we were back in the same place, and we came across a rabbit kill, and it was really strange, this rabbit kill. It was, the way it was dismembered was the rabbit's head appeared to be pulled apart, and its arms and legs and things were dismembered, and it looked like something just grabbed it and just pulled it to pieces, And but there was no very little skin or anything else left. The head had part of the spine still sticking to it. So I don't know what could have done that, but I suspect it could have been a cougar, but I can't be sure. But anyway, right where this rabbit was found, a few feet from where the head was, my wife noticed a footprint, and the heel of this footprint was real deep into the ground, and so we poured a cast of it. And after we got the cast out, I always leave them sit for about 2 weeks to dry out real good. And I started cleaning this cast, and I discovered dermal ridges, dermatoglyphics in this thing. And they weren't running in the same direction as a human's would. These were running parallel with the length of the foot instead of, the way a human would, going across the width. And so I have that there, and it's great. I mean, the heel is just as plain as day. You can see it. I mean, just as big as the nose on your face. It sticks out at you. So then, doing more research, I think it was 2 years ago. Now we were again on the ATV, and we were driving down alongside one of the lakes down in the wetlands, and there was myself, Dusty Ruth, Joe Overton, and my wife. My wife was driving the ATV this time. I'm sitting in the right-hand seat, and we're driving down alongside this lake, and all at once I see the biggest footprint I've ever seen in my life. And I yelled for her to stop. We got out, and we all started checking this footprint out, and it was huge. That thing was 18 inches long. And so, of course, we didn't have our casting materials with us. We had to go all the way back to the truck and get it. But we cast that footprint, and I have it out here on my desk today because I don't know where else I'm going to put it. It's so big.
Wow.
But yeah, it shows toes. I can see 3 toes in this footprint, but it's about let me see, eight. I think it's 8 inches across the front of the foot, and 6 inches across the heel. And of course, it was in the grass, but wherever this creature was heavy enough to make such an impression in that grass that there were still visible signs of the toes and everything in it, and that was the greatest find I ever found there, I believe, in that area. But we had there was another sighting there as well, and several of us saw it. And actually, I was there with a parabolic microphone, and I could hear this thing walking through the woods. It was that area down there is just a hotbed of activity. But we've been around. We've been around to different areas, and we've seen signs in other spots. And I did get a vocalization at Beaver Creek State Park in June of I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but it was right after a real nasty thunderstorm. We were camping up in the top. There's a campground way up on top of this great big hill, and there was a thunderstorm rolling in. Well, the people we were with were in tents, and they decided that they're going to get out of Dodge because they didn't want to get blown away in this thunderstorm. And while my wife and I were there, and we had our camper, and we couldn't really just abandon our camper and take off. So we battened down the hatches, and we stayed there while the storm blew through. Excuse me. But about, I don't know, it was about 12:30, 12:45 in the morning, and I opened up the windows after that storm blew through to let some air in, and I kept kind of hearing something behind our camper, and I kept telling my wife, I'm hearing something out here. And so I grabbed one of my audio recorders, and I stuck it up in the window of the camper, and I kind of no sooner got that thing set up there, and I got a vocalization. Now, where this came from was across the road from where the campground was, and there's like a ravine down there, a real deep, steep ravine, very heavily wooded all the way around it, and whatever was down there and made that vocalization was down in that ravine. And so it couldn't have been human. I'm not going to say couldn't have been, but it didn't appear to be human, and I don't know what kind of person in their right mind would be out there at 12:45 in the morning down in a ravine making a vocalization right after a thunderstorm. But I did get that on audio, and so I'm hoping someday to have it enhanced and see what we can make of it.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
we've gone to a lot of different places and seen and heard a lot of different things, and I've heard vocalizations in other places. Unfortunately, I don't have the audio. Well, I do. It's on my computer, but I don't, have it where I can just go get it and play it right now.
Yeah, that's cool. Man, any other good stuff?
Well, I became fairly good friends with Dr. Meldrum, Jeff Meldrum, and I've learned an awful lot from him. And in talking to him and speaking to him about different creatures and possibilities and early humans, hominids, and things like that, he he got me interested in studying paleoanthropology. And I also became kind of acquaintance of Dr. Esteban Sarmiento. I think you know who that is, right?
Oh yes,
Esteban
yes.
is the
He's awesome.
yeah
I
he's
love his work.
yeah he's a very famous primatologist,
Yeah.
and so between those two guys, they got me interested in both paleoanthropology and primatology, and I started looking at the Bigfoot phenomenon from a different perspective. And I started going back in time and trying to figure out what uh, possible early hominid or hominids or hominoids could possibly be an ancestor of, Bigfoot, or, what we call Bigfoot or Sasquatch today. So, of course, you've seen, and I know you know all about the skeleton that Dr. Meldrum uh, came up with for the Bigfoot. It's 8.5 feet tall, correct?
Yes.
You know about that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was able to talk to him in depth about that, and the reason that they built it the way they did is because they wanted to get something that was very robust and about the same size. They wanted to make it about the same size as what uh, an adult Bigfoot would be. So what they did was they took a nearly complete skeleton of Homo neanderthalensis and they enlarged it. And of course, they had to change the limb proportions, the legs and arms and all that, to make it fit the descriptions of a Bigfoot. But on top of that skeleton, now he couldn't really use the skull of a Neanderthal because it didn't fit the description of what people describe as a Bigfoot. Now, of course, a lot of people will say they've seen these Bigfoot and they appeared not to have any neck, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so, but everybody or every hominid throughout time has had 7 cervical vertebrae. So you've got to have a neck. You got to have a neck. You don't have a neck, you got nothing to attach the head to the shoulders with.
Right.
But the reason that people say that this doesn't have a neck is because of the massive jaw, okay, of a Bigfoot. And so when Dr. Meldrum started doing research on all this, the descriptions and things, he looked at a creature that's about 2.8 million years old called Paranthropus boisei. Now, Paranthropus had a massive jaw, and I believe it was Mary Leakey at one time called it the Nutcracker Man because of the massive jaw and the teeth on this thing. And it had the type of brow ridge that people describe. It has a sagittal crest, and it has the smaller cranium or brain case. And so he took a skull from Paranthropus boisei and had it enlarged to the point that it would fit on top of that skeleton. And that's how he came up with the looks of the skeleton for the Bigfoot skeleton. I asked him, I said, did you do anything special with the feet? I said, because we always talk about, the mid-tarsal flexibility and things like that. And he said, no. He said, we didn't do anything special with the feet. We were going for were the proportions of the size to make this thing, appear to be the same size as what a Bigfoot would be. So they didn't do anything with the feet. They just they took the feet of the Neanderthal and they enlarged them. And the rib cage of a Neanderthal, of course, is very heavy and robust, a thick-boned hominid. So they used that and they enlarged the rib cage and all the leg bones and bones and everything else. And that's an incredible undertaking. That would take an awful lot of work to come up with the proportions to build a skeleton like that. So, my hat's off to them because there's a lot of work in that.
So what you're saying is that the jaw is so big that it fills in and covers up where the neck is, so the neck's actually hidden. So that's why they're saying they
Ex-
don't see the neck.
Exactly. That's what it
Okay.
is. The jaw is so massive that it comes down and it appears uh, uh, to, sit right on the shoulders, and it looks like there's no neck, but there is. And another thing to keep in mind is Bigfoot is so heavily muscled. Now, the trapezoid muscles on a Bigfoot would attach kind of to the rear of the skull, very similar to that of a gorilla. And they're so massive, and they come down and they attach to the shoulders. Well, that would also make it appear as though there was no neck. Because it would just look like the head is sitting right on the shoulders. But that's right, the jaw of that thing is so massive that it would actually appear as though it's sitting right on top of the shoulders, and you couldn't see the neck very well.
Well, Dan, let me ask you this: what would that massive jaw serve a purpose for? Well, it's I mean, I guess it would give one hell of a bite radius or ratio, or but
It would, it would help it to eat very tough, coarse, fibrous vegetation, nuts, things like that. And of course, we know that Bigfoot is an omnivore, and his teeth would be very similar to ours. But that jaw, down through time, if this creature has evolved through time from, let's say, a Paranthropus, and it interbred with another creature, it may not have evolved to the point where that jaw has had the opportunity to evolve along the lines of, let's say, a human, because our jaws are very fragile in comparison to a Paranthropus or a Bigfoot. And so this thing would probably eat very tough, fibrous vegetation. Now, in the springtime around the swamps and things, there's all those cattails, and all those roots from the cattails and everything are well, I would say they're edible, and there's a lot of other coarse, harsh, tough vegetation out there, and it would take that kind of a jaw to be able to crush that food up, and to be able to get it down in its stomach. And its teeth would be very large. The surface area would be very large, just like it is in a Paranthropus. Now, I have a jaw of a Paranthropus here in my collection, and the surface area of the molars on this Paranthropus is 4 times larger than that of a human. And Paranthropus, it didn't stand as tall as a human. It was like 4'11", inches tall. So it wasn't very big, but its jaw was enormous. And so just imagine, how big that jaw is of a Bigfoot, and the kinds of vegetation that it could eat. And even, it could crush bones. So, it may even crush bones to get the marrow out. So, that's
you got me thinking. I mean, cut you off, but you got me thinking. Also, the reports up in Alaska of them eating clams and the seafood and stuff.
sure,
it would make sense.
sure it does. Yeah, and they, but they're, if it's edible, I'm sure they eat it. And these things scare grizzly bears out of it, away. So who's to say they don't? They have no natural predators. Because they're so massive and so strong. And but yeah, up in Alaska, eating the clams. In fact, I think down here in the lower 48 people have observed them eating the freshwater clams too.
Oh, that's impressive. That's really wild. You're talking about your collection. I have seen some of your collection, and I noticed you had some sculptures. Are those your own doing, or what is the deal with the sculptures?
Now, which sculptures are those?
I remember seeing some heads that were done that were pretty wild looking. They were really, really lifelike looking, really.
Okay, I have a collection. I think I have 5 of them. And these heads were made by a fellow in Idaho named Monster Man Dan. He's an FX artist. And he made me these 4 different heads, Bigfoot heads. And the very first one I ever got was a black one. And I was really impressed with this because that black head was on the TV show Monster Quest. Do you remember Monster Quest?
Oh, yeah, one of my favorites.
Yeah, and so he made a costume for the TV show Monster Quest. And this black Bigfoot head that I have was part of the costume for that TV show. And so I was thrilled to death to get that. And then after, I got that, well, I said, I want more. So, I corresponded with him back and forth, and over a period of time, I came up with 5 of them. And they're, different colors. I wanted them different colors to match what people have seen. Now, I have kind of a cinnamon colored one, a gray, like a grayish black, almost like not a coyote, but almost like a wolf colored. Let's see, of course, I've got the black one, and then I have a blonde one. There have been an awful lot of reports of blonde colored Bigfoot, or white or blonde Bigfoot. So he made that. In fact, that's my favorite one. I just love that thing because it looks so realistic to me. But he made those. I did do some of my own sculptures, busts. I've done quite a few busts. And, of course, I sold most of them. But I have a white one that I did. And it has a cape nose. It doesn't have the hooded nose like a human. It's got a cape nose. And then I have another one that's got the hooded nose. And, of course, I made a little baby Bigfoot. And I call it Skookum, which is, Skookum is actually a main character in children's books that I'm writing with a couple other folks. But I made that, and I've just got a whole bunch of foot cats out there, and just other things. I have a partial jaw of Gigantopithecus. Well, I can't even think of everything at the moment.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Growing up and getting involved in it, did you have anybody that you looked up to, or that you really studied to get any ideas from, or that you thought of as a mentor, or
Oh no, I didn't really have the opportunity to really correspond with anybody. Until I got a little bit older, and I was able to get around and, make phone calls and contact different people. But I really have to say that, I had the opportunity to get to know and become friends with Bob Gimlin. And he is just a phenomenal guy. He's great. Bob is great. In fact, he's one of the characters in our first children's book. But I told him the first time I ever met him, I was standing there, I was shaking his hand, and I'm talking to him, and I said, I called him Mr. Gimlin. And he said, oh, don't call me Mr. Gimlin. He said, call me Bob. I said, okay. So I said, the very first time I saw the film, that you and Roger Patterson made back in 1967. I said, you got me hooked. And he said, well, I'm sorry. He got me hooked. But like I got hooked on drugs or something. But he's a great guy. My wife just loves him, and she says that he's her boyfriend. But yeah, he's a genuine article, and I had the opportunity to interview him one day, and he asked me to keep the interview private, and to this day I've never revealed that interview to anybody. And I recorded this interview, and I'm telling you what, the guy is phenomenal. Some of the things he told me that I will never reveal to anybody else, because he asked me not to, and that's, I got to keep my word, but I really look up to Bob Gimlin. He's just a great guy, super gentleman, and but yeah, I'd have to say that if anybody was my hero, it would be him. As far as mentors concerned, I would have to say, Jeff Meldrum, because he's the one that got me into studying paleoanthropology.
Wow. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Patty film coming, this month. And since you brought that up, and you have personally talked to Bob, and I'm not going to ask you to give anything away, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. What is your intake on that film? There's so much controversy, and with your background of researching and who you've talked to, what do you think of that film, as far as it's being real and what happened?
I think it's 100% authentic.
That's cool.
I have looked at. I've watched that thing over and over and over again, and you can see the front of the foot flexing. Well, you're not going to do that in a costume. You're not going to cause the foot of a costume to flex upwards, when the foot moves, as you're walking. Then there seems to be a herniation in the fascia of the thigh just above the knee, because when Patty takes a step, you can see a muscle bulge. And so, every time she takes a step, the muscle bulges and then it goes away. So it seems as though there's like a herniation in the fascia there where the muscle is. So every time she takes a step, that muscle kind of pops out. Okay. Then you have to look at the way she turns. Okay. When she turns, her entire upper torso turns. Her head can't turn as far as a human's can, because of the structure of her what I want to say here, cervical column, and the musculature in her neck. That anatomy up there around the neck and shoulders is very similar to that of a gorilla. Now, I don't know if you've ever noticed when a gorilla turns to look, he kind of looks up and over at you, and his upper body turns, and it's very similar to what Patty does. And so there's what's his name, Bob Titmus. Is that what his name was? Bob Titmus? No, not Hieronymus. Said he was the man in the suit. Well, that's a bunch of baloney. That's baloney, because there's no way in this planet that man, being 6 foot something, is going to grow to be like 7'3" or 7'4", which was proven to be the height of Patty by the other gentleman that analyzed the film.
Bill Munns.
Yeah, Bill Munns. Bill Munns.
Yes.
So there's no doubt in my mind that film is authentic. I know a lot of people have said that you can see the mouth open and things of that nature. And I've seen the film where they show that as well. But the most telling things for me were the foot, first of all. then the herniation in the fascia of the muscle there just above the knee, and then the turning of the upper torso, and then you can actually see the muscle movement in the upper body as well. Let's say in the deltoids and things like that, you can see the muscle movement. So back in 1967, they didn't have muscle suits. They didn't have the technology to make anything that was remotely close to what you see in this film. And even in the movies, the Planet of the Apes, those were, you look at those costumes that the actors wore, and they're just not lifelike. And that's what we have with the Patterson film. It's all very fluid and lifelike, and so there's no doubt in my mind.
Oh, wow, yeah. And she also has a massive jaw. You can see that when she turns too. I mean, that's definitely prominent there too.
Exactly. Yeah, and I started, when I talked to Jeff Meldrum about that, and he used the Paranthropus skull on there. I'm like, well, I wonder if he knows something that nobody else does. And so, I started doing a whole lot of research on, there's a Paranthropus robustus and Boisei. And then, I'm looking into a bunch of other early hominids and these other creatures, hominoids. And, what's to say that there isn't another creature out there that has yet to be discovered that didn't interbreed with Paranthropus and, over a period of time, evolve and adapt to the climates and situations throughout the world, and become, what we know as Bigfoot or the Almas, or, even down in Sumatra, Orang Pendek, but I'm not saying that Orang Pendek is a Bigfoot. I'm just saying, there's a possibility that they could be somehow linked in the genome someplace.
Yeah, it's crazy. These Bigfoot type creatures are seen all around the world. It's just not right here in the United States. There's got to be a whole lot more to it. It's not just here.
Right. Now I'm also friends with Igor Burtsev, and I think it was 2 years ago now. It was a year ago. A little over a year ago, Igor he flew in from Moscow, and he spent 4 days with me, and I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Igor at length about quite a few different things. And, he showed me a lot of photos that they have there in Siberia of different things. And there was one gentleman that had an encounter with a Bigfoot there, and he actually made some drawings of it. He drew one picture on a piece of bark, and Igor happened to show me that and told me the story of this thing. But he said that this fellow there in Siberia, I had to take this with a grain of salt. Don't get me wrong, Igor is a great guy, and he's been around and he's done this for a very, very long time. But this guy supposedly became friends with a family of Bigfoot over there in Siberia, and he drew pictures of them all. And I may later on post a few photos for everybody to see of the drawings that this guy drew of this Bigfoot family. So everybody can see what this guy was talking about, the Bigfoot that he saw in Siberia and dealt with. But, they have very similar things over there in Russia to what we have here. And one thing that I discovered in talking to Igor is some of those Bigfoot over there in Russia will walk up to like a horse, and they will actually braid the manes on these horses but they don't braid them the way a human would. You know how a lady will braid their hair, and they'll start at the roots and work their way out. Well, these things are somehow braided in a reverse order. I have no idea how anything like that could be done, but it's kind of a strange looking thing. I may have some photos of that as well, of a horse's mane being braided kind of backwards. But these people that had these horses, I guess they would take these braids out, and the next day they'd be right back in there. So really strange things going on over there in Russia too. So, but it's a worldwide phenomenon, and I think that prior to coming out of Africa, I think there's a possibility that the Paranthropus interbred with another creature and evolved to become the species that we know today as Bigfoot. And I think it moved out of Africa, went all through Eurasia, possibly came across the Bering Land Bridge and down into, the North America. But, if it happened long enough ago, of course, you have the one continent. And so, these things could have just expanded over the entire globe and, just been around for thousands of years.
Right. Back when Pangea was the one landmass.
Pangea, yes.
Well, Dan, what's going on with your future? Are you officially retired now, or what? I know your history, what's going on, but maybe a lot of people here don't. So what's up with your future here?
Well, I've pretty much stepped aside. There's a lot of other younger people coming up behind me. I'm no spring chicken anymore, and my health isn't all that great. As far as going into the field and doing any more field research, those days are over. I'm not walking very well anymore. And so I'm pretty much just, I'm still studying the paleoanthropology and the primatology. I don't think I'll ever give that up. But because of my health, I've had to turn down being the guest speaker at a couple conferences. I had to turn down, doing some interviews on podcasts and radio shows. And so I'm pretty much, taking a back seat here and just staying in the background and watching things happen. But I'm always happy to talk to people. In fact, if I start talking about it, I can talk for hours. But I don't actively do a whole lot of research or public speaking anymore.
I can understand that. I'm not going to hold you up anymore today. If you would like to plug your group and your book and whatever thing else you've got going on, please feel free.
Yeah, well, I have a research group called American Primate Exploration, A.P.E for short, A.P.E. We have, I can't even remember how many members we have now. It's moving up close to 2,000 members, 1,600 members, something like that. And but a great bunch of people, great bunch of administrators, a lot of people with a lot of knowledge. There's always something going on in there. So I'm not as active in there as I used to be. My administrators are taking care of things, but things are going pretty well there. But yeah, I started writing a series of children's Bigfoot books with a children's author, and he's been a lifelong friend of mine. His name's Scott Berry. Scott lives out in New Mexico, and the graphic artist for the series of books is Rob Roy Menzies out of Alaska. And our first book is out. It's called Sasquatch Mountain Search for the Magic Cloak. And of course, it's a children's book, but it does have some things in there that you would find if you're doing field research. We're talking about stick structures and tree breaks and things of that nature. And so it's just a tiny little guide to for young folks to read, and it's kind of semi-educational for them. It's fun, but it's kind of semi-educational because we put some actual evidence in these books. So that first book is out. You can find it on Amazon.com, and we're going to be starting on book number 2 this winter. It's called Cougar Valley, and so you can be looking for that probably sometime next spring or summer.
Man, that is awesome. That is awesome, Dan. I can't thank you enough. If y'all are listening to this on Shakey's Porch Talk, please like, subscribe, and please share it. If you're listening to this on the Bigtruth channel on YouTube, please like and subscribe and share it also. Please support your local animal shelters, the no-kill animal shelters, and your local pet rescues. There's a lot of animals out here that need loving homes. I want to put a special shout out also to Sweetwater. If you are a musician or doing podcasts and need equipment, contact Mickey Cushing at sweetwater.com. And Sweetwater is a great place to get equipment. He hooked me up with this equipment I'm using, and the dude is phenomenal. He really did me good. And I also want to put a special thank you out to the band Any Given Sin out of Southern Maryland. They are awesome. They do my music, and they're awesome. A great band to listen to. So you can catch them on YouTube. They're in the studio now working on a new album. And I believe that's all I got going on as far as I can think. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Shakey's Porch Talk. And y'all have a great day, and God bless you all.